So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Live Calm with Andy. Today we're going to be answering the very, very important question of whether or not I am actually dead. And secondly, we're going to be finding out what any of that has to do with mental well-being and with any of you that are watching, and indeed with myself as well. I don't know. We shall find out through the course of today's episode. Each night I die. I know, obviously, from the title of the video today and from the sort of short introductory 30 seconds that I did to camera at the very beginning, I've, been raising suspicions as to my well-being. I can confirm that I am completely fine. I am upright, I am breathing, I am swinging my legs, I am smelling the roses, I'm all of those good things. So basically, why have I decided to put a very clickbait, confusing title to encourage you to read on? In the style of all good modern journalists, all good TV and film producers. Why have I decided to basically be a little bit mysterious in my ways? It all comes down to this quote from Gandhi, which really is what kind of sparked my thinking and my thought process to put together some of the content of today's video. It was partly this and partly also I had been re-listening to my audiobook edition of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and I do intend to produce a little bit more content on specifically Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind later, and some of the ideas that can be extrapolated from that. But I wanted to try and keep this all as short and in a tight little box as I possibly could, because actually I think, a lot of the threads of things that I'm trying to work my way through here can be a little bit, intricate in talking about them, and I don't want to be dragging this out too long, because ultimately I understand that, if I make what I deem to be the perfect masterpiece, it's going to be the same as when Scorsese produces what he deems to be the perfect masterpiece, and he has a 4-hour film in the cinema, and I'm sitting there thinking my bladder isn't long enough to be able to sit and watch all of this. I wish they would break it down into 2-hour parts, because that's all I can manage. This is entirely you guys in your own free time, choosing to sit and watch and listen, and so I want to try and keep it as concise as I possibly can. So the quote in and of itself, as far as I can tell, is attributed to Gandhi. It might be from another individual. I'm not particularly sure. We can go with Gandhi for now. I know there's that old joke about everything on the internet that's a quote can be attributed to either Gandhi or certain other German individuals that may well lead to this video being reported, so we'll ignore that for just now. But basically the long and short of it, this quote says, "Each night I die when I go to bed, and each morning when I wake I am reborn." So that this is the whole fundamental crux of this video. Last night when I went to bed and I went into my deep slumber and I had my sweet dreams of sugar plum fairies and all the rest of it, did I essentially die? No. It's probably the simple answer that all of you will be immediately screaming out, and of course you're correct. But the whole sort of thing, and it's easy to, and looking at this from a kind of mental health perspective and a keeping good sort of check on our own minds, our own trains of thought, our own internal monologues, and also trying to maintain a level of positive self-talk in and of our own heads. It's easy to look at that quote, right? Each night I die, and each morning I'm born, and think, well, essentially what that's telling me is each day is a fresh start. And from a surface level, it is. essentially, if that is all you take from the content today, is basically that each day when you wake up, it doesn't really matter what has preceded your life in the 5, 25, 55, 105 years that you've already lived. Basically, it's a new day. You can run with it, but there's actually, you can kind of take that thought to a deeper level, and that's kind of what I want to explore today. So just to kind of carry on in the vein we are, so this whole, I die each night, each day I'm born, there's kind of two important thoughts that come out of that for me. The first one is obviously the whole today is a new day thing. I don't know how many of you are particularly au fait with the sort of Stoic philosophy. I don't know if any of you ever, watch the Daily Stoic or any of these kind of channels, or listen to any of those type of podcasts or read any of those type of books. But basically, Stoicism is a philosophical belief system from ancient Greece, which round about probably about 10 years ago now, 10 to maybe 7 or 8 years ago, started to become really popular again amongst younger people during the internet age. All of this sort of Stoic thing about, endurance and, carrying on and going through it, which can sound quite brutal really, but actually, there's something in all of that as well. But one of the key components of this philosophy is basically this idea of memento mori, which is Latin for remember that you will die, or remember that you will be dead, or something along those lines. It's basically a reminder that at some point, whether it's today, whether it's in 2 weeks, whether it's not for another 70 years, at some point all of this will come to an end for everybody. And it's supposed to be used as kind of a challenge to say, what would you want to do with your next 24 hours if you knew that you were going to die? There's a sort of subsidiary question that people often use with it, which is, if you knew you were going to die at midnight, or if you had already died yesterday and you had been miraculously brought to life, which is kind of closer to the quote that we were using. What would you want to do with your 24 extra hours that you've been given? And I can guarantee you, bottom line, if anyone was asked that question, it would not be, I want to sit and feel depressed for the next 24 hours. It would not be, I want to continue to be profoundly agoraphobic and unable to leave my house. It would not be, I want to continue to be heavily socially anxious and not see any of my family, my friends. It would not be, I want to have several panic attacks at the thought of leaving my house. If you knew that you were already dead and you had only 24 more hours to live, and you knew that was it, regardless of what you were dealing with, and this is not to say that these kind of, serious mental health conditions just magically disappear when we decide, oh, it's all right, I've reached the end. Lots of these things do. There's a very serious argument about whether there's, physiological causes of them, but beyond that, there is actually also very, very deep debates about whether there's neurochemical imbalance in the brain. They do know that in certain people, when they've had autopsies performed on them after their deaths for various reasons, again, I don't really want to go into it too much, but they know that people, when they have been displaying certain kind of mental health issues or signs and symptoms of mental health, or signs and symptoms of other things along with poor mental health, they can actually find that these people have significant damage to certain areas of their brain already. So that's not to say that it all disappears when you decide, you know what, none of it matters anymore, it's all great. But, and this is the key point out of all of this, if you knew you were going to only have 24 more hours, you would decide that that day you were going to do the most important things for yourself. Secondly, you would decide that you were essentially, in practicality, not going to devote any time, where possible, to anything negative at all. It's all going to be focused on either fun, having fun, enjoying the company of people that are important to you, eating food that you enjoy. And again, if we've only got 24 hours, we're going to be having, ice cream and macaroni cheese, which is not great for us if we eat it repeatedly. And I'm going to come on to that a little bit towards the end. But basically, we would be having kids' birthday party dinners. It would be ice cream and cake all day. But we would not continue to have quite such a feeling of stuckness about it. If you truly decided that today I'm going to spend the next 24 hours and it's going to be the worst day of my life, we'll take the example of someone who is seriously depressed, to the point where they are potentially a danger to themselves. If they knew that they only had 24 hours left to live, they are not going to sit there and give it, oh, it's all so difficult. It's, I just can't feel any joy whatsoever. Nothing's important. If you knew you only had 24 hours left, you might still not have these feelings of taking joy from certain things. You might not, feed the ducks and decide that feels amazing and it's really lighting up your brain with all of that good serotonin. But you would certainly, at the very least, you would prioritise things that day that are really, really important for you to do. And this is kind of like, number one most important thing. I think from all of the things that I'm going to hopefully have the opportunity to share with lots of people through this channel, the number one most important thing I would like to get across to people is really your situations that you're facing might be absolutely awful. I was going to use a different word there, but I do understand that potentially, young people might be listening to this, so we'll go with awful. But essentially, the situations you're in might be hell. It might be absolute torture. It might be the worst kind of torture ever conceived by man. But what makes it unbearable, what makes it intolerable, what takes it to the level where you cannot endure it and it becomes overwhelming and it becomes a crisis, is the idea of longevity. It's this idea of, I am going to have to be like this forever. There is no end. This suffering is going to be the same or worse as it is now forever. And it's really, really, really important to grasp, I think, is the first point when dealing with this and when doing our own sort of internal work and our own sort of internal soul searching, that essentially all we need to do, all that's really, really important today, each morning when we get up, is to plan and execute to the best of our ability. And it doesn't have to be executed perfectly. It's okay to not quite manage for reasons that are, beyond our control. But to the best of our ability, we should want to be the best human beings and to do the best we physically can for the next 24 hours. Let's not think in terms of, I've got another 50 years of life to live. You don't live 50 years of life in a day. If you're coming to the end of your life, it works equally as well. Lots of people, when they're coming to the end of their life, some people find it as a great relief. They think, I've seen everything and I've done everything I want to do. They're quite content, they're quite replete about it. And other people are thinking, I didn't quite get there. I had a lot of things. I know certainly people in my life that have reached the end of their lives and gone, I was a few months, I was a couple of years, a couple of weeks short of just finalising everything I had to do. And that's kind of the regrets that they have at the end of their life. And it's because they had, I suppose, the illusion of having more time. And I suppose that they get caught out in not quite having enough time. And people who are suffering terribly for their mental health suffer all the more because they have the illusion of having to deal with it for a lot more time than they might actually potentially have to. And it's not to say that, whatever thing you're dealing with just now will go away entirely, or you'll never have it again, or you'll never find it, and there's different levels to mental health. Obviously, people who have very serious and very chronic conditions are more likely to have long-lasting, continuing effects. So that people that are having very sort of chronic and acute, but short-lasting life stresses, job losses and things, are likely to find that comes and goes, and that they are less likely to recur that unless the situation that caused it reappears. But essentially that is kind of the long and short of it. If we do nothing else today, we should want to live the next 24 hours in as much as we possibly can, tightly, succinctly, and achieving all of the number 1, 2 and 3 priorities on our list. And whether we achieve that perfectly or whether we don't, essentially we need to be thinking along the lines of, what would I want to do today? And I know that certainly for a lot of people with poor mental health, one of the problems they have is they feel very much less like normal people because they feel incapable of doing and thinking and being the way normal people are. Well, if your thought in your head is, I only need to try and live like a normal person or as close as I can to a normal person for 24 hours and do as much as I can and try and fill it with as much happiness as I can, you really you'll find that your ability to endure doing things that you found difficult, having conversations that you would have found difficult, and actually telling people. And that's the number one most important thing, is when you're mentally struggling to talk to other people. And it can be embarrassing thinking, for the rest of my days this person's going to know that I was really struggling and not being a functional human being, because everyone's a functional human being all the time, evidently. But if you were going to die when you got to bed that evening, would you hide it, or would you just say, I've really been struggling with this? So that's kind of the sort of beginning point about I'm going to call it grabbing life by the horns, and there is a lot to that. Now the second thing which I really got to thinking about was kind of a deeper point, kind of a more, how to put it, kind of a more intricate point to sort of tease out. And I'm aware that obviously this has been quite long already, and I don't really want to go super long, so I will try and go through this as succinctly but also as quickly as I can, and hopefully this is something that I'll recover and flesh out again basically in other videos. But the second point I had about that was if you look to the sort of the purpose of mindful meditation or any of the Zen meditations, I don't know if anyone has seen any of my other videos, one of my previous videos. If you're watching this when it comes out, there is only one other video, so it's that one to go and have a look at. But basically, the sort of mindfulness meditation, the various Zen meditations, which I have been doing regularly as a practice up until now, all kind of get you essentially to try and focus in on the current moment. You know, you have to focus on your breathing. Because, you know, that's something that's happening right now. It's not something terrible that happened in the past. It's not something awful that's happened in the future. It's just something that's happening right now. So, you know, they all get you to focus in on that. Try not to have thoughts interrupting in your mind. If you do have thoughts interrupting in your mind, you kind of acknowledge them and then let them float on their merry way and just go back to in and out on your breathing. Also in the other video I'd mentioned about Shikantaza, which for anyone who doesn't know, basically Shikantaza, as far as I understand, translates to mean just sitting. So, you know, we are not, you know, sitting reading a book, we're not sitting having a lively conversation. It's a form of meditative practice where essentially we just sit. It's not to say we can't look around and kind of take everything in, but we are essentially just sitting. We're not thinking. It's not purposeful time of doing anything. We are sitting for the purpose of sitting, which basically is everything we would do in a normal meditation session, minus we're not actually really focusing on our breathing. We don't really care about our breathing too much. We're just sitting. And so they're all very much about getting us to focus on the present moment. And for anyone who's done any CBT, and I am in no way qualified to give expert advice about CBT, however, I will give you sort of a very brief, round the edges explanation of it. Is cognitive behavioural therapy is basically trying to get you, from my understanding, as much as possible to sort of rewire your critical thinking in your prefrontal cortex, all this beautiful bit at the front of your head, and challenge the negative chat that goes on and replace it with more sort of helpful, positive talk. And one of the things that they really encourage people to be doing is essentially to be mindful and living in the moment, in the right now as much as possible. Because when you're doing that and you're trying to not engage actively with your negative thoughts, but just let them come and go, the purpose of that is in the moment, if you have a whole lot of, you know, negative chat, all of the sort of chat of, you know, I can't do this, this is awful, I'm not safe, I need to go home, I'm going to pass out, I'm going to be sick, nobody likes me, everyone's laughing at me, all of these kind of thoughts that can pop in from the brain when people are having very poor mental health periods. The idea is that essentially creates this negative tension inside, and the whole purpose of the mindfulness is, and the reason they get you to use the breathing is breathing in a certain way does actually lead to slowing down your sort of flight or flight response. So it's kind of doing two jobs at the one time. But the purpose, as we are talking about today, is that, you know, when you have these negative thoughts, they can trigger a response in the body because of various sections of the brain that have been wired to do what they call a fire together. So, you know, one neuron that is in charge of this negative thought that fires, has an impulse go down it, can also wire at the same time to, you know, create a fear response, a fear stimulus in the body. And if it repeatedly fires together, that becomes a stronger impulse. And so the idea of the meditative breathing and the sort of mindfulness about, you know, allowing the thought to come and saying, yep, that's a thought, and letting it go, is that basically when it stimulates this fear response, it's trying to dampen all of that down as much as possible and allow you to basically sit with it. Sit with that thought and that feeling for as long as you can until it passes completely without performing any of what they'd call safety behaviours. So, I don't know, safety behaviours could be anything really. So if a common one is, you're driving in the car, so you turn on the radio to have noise to drown that out, or you're driving the car and you wind the window down to get a blast of cold air in the face, or you frantically drink juice because you feel like you're dehydrated. The emotional response has caused your throat to go dry, so you're just going to drink juice as much as you possibly can to try and rehydrate because you're just not hydrated enough. And these types of meditations, particularly Zen ones, and the sort of philosophy of Zen, is that there's a whole lot more in it. There's a book called The Power of Now, which kind of has a similar thought in it, and it's not entirely uncommon in various bits of culture, so don't for any moment think this is exclusive to just the two I've mentioned. It can come from lots of places, but the whole sort of now thing is that, the past doesn't really exist as far as mindfulness or Zen philosophies see it. The past is gone. It's not real anymore. No one that you remember in the past is real. They are all the people that they are right now. Be they alive or dead, they are only as they are now. They aren't real. They're only kept alive by the human memory and the ability to recall. And all of the sort of future situations, again, these are imaginations of the brain, regardless of whether or not they are absolutely going to happen, strongly likely to happen, might happen, or probably won't, or definitely won't happen things. They are only real in as so much as our brains can visualise it and conceive of how that might be. And so the sort of the real driving principle of that is that, essentially we are only alive just now. We have no past, we have no future. And again, that can be, for mental health purposes, that can be really great, or that can be really poor. So it can be really great, again, in terms of if I am only alive right now, and let's say I'm someone that has an awful lot of rumination type thinking, so I keep thinking over the same things again, and it's about going to a family event where, several family members don't get along, and it often leads to verbal confrontation, it leads to physical confrontation, various things, and it always has done since I was a child. Absolutely not something that's from my own personal experience, but I'm sure people out there will recognise that. And it's happened every time since I was young, and there's something about it inside physically leads me to dread. And I for the whole, month before it, get really, really tightly, passionately worked up about, I do not want to go with this thing. I do not want to go with this thing. I do not want to go to this thing. And I feel awful. I feel absolutely awful. I cannot sleep properly. I struggle to eat. As it gets closer, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and it just builds up. And by using the meditative techniques, again, check in my previous video, check in any of my other videos which are not out yet but will be out soon, about sort of the breathing techniques and meditation to try and focus you back in on what's happening right now. But if you are able to tap into that and get yourself back into right now, this awful situation is not happening. you have no reason, essentially, to be having the feelings that you are. They're inappropriate for the situation that you're in, if that makes sense. And so we can train ourselves slowly and over a lot of time and with a lot of practice to not have what they call anticipatory anxiety, that sort of build up to an event. And we can just focus ourselves on, and sometimes that will involve sitting with yourself and just saying, look, I, just now, am nowhere near 100% where I need to be with this. So I am going to feel crap in the run up to this. I am going to overthink about it. It's really, really, really going to weigh heavily on me because I've not mastered the skills that I need to in order to manage this and make it easier than it was the last time. But I'm still going to do them. And I'll get onto that in the second part of this thought. But, essentially, by focusing in on the now, the day itself might be fine. It's in the future. I don't know whether these family members are going to verbally shout and bawl and, generally create a scene. I don't know whether, Uncle Charlie and Uncle Greg are going to, get into a physical altercation when they've had a couple of drinks again. It might not happen. If it doesn't happen and it becomes clear that it's not going to happen, I might actually relax and think, do you know what? This is fine. This is fine. It's not going to happen. Uncle Charlie might not actually turn up in the end. Uncle Charlie might have, in his own head, gone, I am sick of having Uncle Greg every time getting up in my face and, starting a fight with me, because Uncle Charlie will never start, evidently. So I'm not going to go. Not worth my time. And he might be self-regulating enough in his own behaviour to think, I don't need that. I'm too old for all of that. I'm giving up. And so you might have had no reason to worry in the first place. Or it might happen, in which case, to feel either fear or shame or embarrassment at that point in time is bad. No one should have to feel ashamed, embarrassed or afraid at a family event in their free time. But you at that point, at least it's appropriate to the situation. But all of the build up beforehand, it's not appropriate to the situations that you're in. It's appropriate to a situation you think you might be in. And so back to the second point on that, which is more about the living in the now thing. And again, we've gone from I'm only living the next 24 hours and sort of using that to prioritise our own behaviours. We're now moving to I only live for, the 1 second, just now I'm breathing, and then I die and I'm reborn for the next second and take another breath. And, we're really micro adjusting through our days. But essentially, if I'm only going to live for 1 day, and this kind of takes us back to our pizza problem. Let's go back out to the day. If I'm only going to live for 1 day and we go back to what am I going to have to eat for my 3 meals that day? Or am I going to have 5 meals? Am I going to have 6 meals? Am I going to eat so much that I make myself sick? Because who cares, right? It then comes back to the more important question of, and this is a completely separate topic in and of itself, but, if I was going to live a perfect 24 hours, I would want to be making all of the best decisions for myself that I could. And the funny thing that goes on, and this is where, living as a Zen monk in a monastery and only ever living in the present moment and, laughing when a cup of tea falls over because it's a perfect example of Zen. Or, living mindfully and, only thinking about right now. So I spend all of my savings to get a PlayStation because that makes me feel really great. Now, falls down. But essentially, if I only had 24 hours and I wanted to live them perfectly, and to be free from whatever afflictions had held me down in the past, we would want to be someone that we are proud of. And so maybe going back to our 24-hour exercise, that's the second thing to add in, not just what would I prioritise in that day, who would I want to speak to, what would I want to eat, what would I want to think about, but actually adding a fourth thing, which is who would I want to be? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, in as much as we maybe aren't selfish people in terms of we're not narcissists that are staring at ourselves in the mirror or through a camera talking to people we can't see on the internet, but essentially we are. We're all a little bit selfish. We only see with our own eyes and hear with our own ears and talk with our own mouths and think with our own brains. Essentially, we all live for ourselves because that's all that we have to interact with the world with. We don't have the ability to switch our view and physically see or hear what anyone else is seeing or thinking, which is part of where all the mental health stuff, really, really starts from, is we are very internally set up from a genetic point of view and a physiological point of view to survive long enough to pass on our genes to the next generation. And so as long as our mechanisms are sufficient to allow us to do that, it really doesn't matter if we live terrible, awful, short and brutal lives. As long as we're healthy enough to pass on our genetics, that's all that really matters. So why would we want to eat our vegetables? Why would we want to go and do a 4-hour run? Why would we want to donate money to charity? Why would we want to help an elderly neighbour by painting their living room, or helping them to mow their grass, or any of these things? Why would we want to do it? And it comes back to essentially what we all really deep down want is to be proud of ourselves and to feel proud of ourselves and feel proud of what we do, proud of the fact that we help the people we love, proud of the fact that we've achieved everything we wanted to achieve in our lives. We want to be the heroes of our own story, basically. And we know that there are certain things that we might not like in the given moment, but are good for us. And so we need to think of these actions as kind of being positives and negatives, positives and detractions from our, net balance of healthy versus unhealthy, good versus bad, good versus evil, good versus the intentions of our bosses and our managers and our governments and all these other evil actors that are coming to take everything away from us. And so we would want to be doing at least a little bit of the good things. So we'd want our day on balance to have more positive actions. And we know, if you ask anyone, they'll say, I don't want to exercise, I hate exercising. But we know it's good for us. So you might go, do you know what, I'm only going to live for the next 24 hours. Why would I bother doing that? But you know that if you went for a 10-minute walk, very gentle 10-minute walk, you would feel a little bit better about yourself at the end of the day, right? You wouldn't feel great now, but you would then. And so you might very well want to go and do that. And you might much rather have a chocolate bar for dessert versus an apple or an orange or a banana, which can equally just be something that's a nice sweet treat, but you don't get that real rush of sugar into your veins. But ultimately, if you went to bed and thought, do you know what, I really wanted a chocolate bar earlier on, and I sat and thought about it and went, no, I'm going to just have an apple because actually I quite like apples. There's nothing wrong with apples. Yes, it's not a chocolate bar, but I can do that. You can then sort of add another positive credit into your little piggy bank, and you can add up and go, I went for a run, I had an apple, I brushed my teeth after every meal instead of just twice a day. It only took me an extra 30 seconds, but now I have 3 things at the end of the day to do. Gratitude practice, which is basically all of this is, but again, for another time. And so you probably would choose to do some of these things, and just, you don't have to do it all. And, at the end of the day, if you really don't want to run, you don't need to run. If you really want to have a chocolate bar, one small chocolate bar, it's not going to be the end of the world. If you're someone who knows that you're a problem eater, and that one chocolate bar is going to turn into several chocolate bars and a bag of crisps and all of the rest of it, you might want to be a bit more careful about having that one chocolate bar. But if you're the kind of person who goes, do you know what, I can have one chocolate bar today, it's not very good for me, but I know that I'm not going to do it again all week, you might go, today I don't care. I've already got enough positive credit in my bank today to say I don't need it. But that's for you to decide, and ultimately you're your own person. But that's kind of all of the point of if I die tonight and I wake anew tomorrow, and I know that I've only got those 24 hours and then I'll die again that evening, what would I want to do? This is kind of all the be all and end all of it. It's about, I suppose it's the age-old advice that, we all get taught even as children, to break things down into manageable chunks. You can't live all of your life tomorrow, and you won't live all of your life tomorrow, hopefully. So break it down into little bits that you can manage. And, at the end of the day, if there's a day where you try and do that and it doesn't quite happen, it's okay to sit and think and say to yourself, I just wasn't quite up to it today. But ultimately that is fine as well, as long as you're managing to do more today than you did yesterday, or on average have done more this week than you did last week. It's really all anybody can ask of you, even if it seems like what you're doing is insignificant compared to other people. And I think that's very important. You no longer are in a competition with other people. When you only have one day to live, you're not competing with anybody else. You are doing everything for yourself, and you're competing only with yourself to fit in as much of the stuff that you need and want to do today as you can physically manage. So that is everything. Thank you very much for all of those who've made it all of the way through today. I do look forward to seeing you all, hopefully, in future content that will be coming to the channel. I'm trying to release quite regularly. If there is anything in particular you want, please do feel free to leave it down in the comment section below. As usual with all other people on the internet begging for attention, if you could give me a like and share this content with anyone else, and also subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. It will help me to reach more people and hopefully to provide more help to as many people as I can. For anyone who's found this because of mental health, you'll know that when you're in that kind of space, a lot of the voices that you hear are from people who are also having crises of their own, and it can become a very negative echo chamber. And the people that have had these crises and then made some form of recovery, no matter how small, tend to leave that bit of the community behind. So I want this to be a place where my voice spreads to as many people as I physically can, and tell them it doesn't matter what place you're in at the moment. If you're prepared to do difficult work and do some of the easier work, and to be as brave as you are, because trust me, no matter what place you're in at the moment, you are stronger and 1,000 times braver than you think. If by liking, sharing and subscribing this you can help me to reach more and more of these people, to spread this positive message, I will be forever grateful. Anyway, that is all for today. Thank you very much, and I hope for the rest of your day you live calm.